Welcome to NUPI and welcome to this seminar on history as politics in Putin's Russia. My name is Helge Blakkisrud. I'm the head of the research group on Russia, Asia and international trade here at NUPI, and it's my pleasure to chair this afternoon's session. The topic today is memory politics, or how collective memory is mobilized for political purposes. How certain events are remembered and recorded or disregarded and discarded in order to serve political goals, such as, for example, the strengthening of national identity. In the presentation, our invited speaker, Professor Alexey Milller from the European University in St. Petersburg, will focus on Russian memory politics and how this has been influenced by European experiences from political usages of the past, as well as how Russia herself attempts to influence its European neighbours with its own politics of memory, ranging from the use of the St. George ribbon and the Immortal Regiment to the legacy of Novorossiya. Before we start, I should mention that this event, as all events at NUPI these days, is streamed live, and it will also be available afterwards at NUPI's YouTube channel. But now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Professor Milller. Please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for coming. The original title of this talk was Russian Memory Politics and the International Context. So it's never enough to say Russia, you have to say Putin's Russia. There will be three parts here. One, the most, so to say, complex, is what happened to memory politics and the perception of memory politics in Europe and in Russia, not only during Putin's time, but starting with, say, perestroika years. And then I shall talk about how Russian political use of the past is targeting European neighbors in terms of, how to put it, negative advertisement, and also what is the positive agenda, how it is being used in this memory politics. So if we look at the end of 1980s and 1990s, we shall see in Europe, and when I'm saying Europe, it is a shortcut to the European Union. When I'm saying Eastern Europe, it is about former socialist countries, and Western Europe is about this old Europe, as Rumsfeld used to call it. Now, in Europe, which by that time was Western Europe, the dominant approach to memory politics was exactly that it is not politics, that it is a space which has to be controlled by civil society, where politicians should not intervene, and that was made clear during the famous historical strike and this conflict where this very notion of Geschichtspolitik was coined by Habermas to just block the attempts of Kohl to interfere in this sphere. And generally the understanding was that it is the space where we overcome political conflicts, where we overcome the logic of politics, which is about conflict. And this approach to memory which some political scientists call cosmopolitan or transnational memory, which was stressing not the conflict but overcoming conflict, which was stressing rather common legacy, and this common legacy was the memory of Holocaust as crime of the crimes, and the necessity of all European nations to ask questions about their own participation in this. And if we look at Russian approach to memory at this period of time, it is surprisingly similar. There was a lot of talk about blank spots in history which had to be addressed, and they had to be addressed in order to overcome the animosities with neighbors. So we talk and we open documents about Katyn in order to find peace with Poland. We talk about famine of 32, 33 in order to find peace with Ukrainian narrative and with Kazakh narrative, for example. We talk about deportations of 49, 47 in Baltic states or in Moldova, again, in order to overcome it. And we condemn the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact as the Supreme Soviet did in 1989, in hope that by that we shall overcome these tensions. Now, these times passed. If we have to describe the relationship between Russia and Europe today in this domain, it is memory war. And this memory war, I would say 3 years ago, is mainly the memory war between Russia and Eastern Europe. Today, after the resolution which was adopted by the European Parliament on the 19th of September this year, one can say that yes, we are at the state of memory war with Europe as such. And behind that is also the change, both in Europe and in Russia, of understanding of what memory politics is about. Because now, everybody agrees that, first of all, it is about politics. So it is about conflict. It is not about finding truth. It is not about talking to each other. Or rather, if it is about talking to each other, it is not about understanding each other, but establishing your version of interpretation as dominant. And the whole story is about how you make your narrative dominant. How we came to this. Before East European countries joined European Union, the informal or even formal requirement was that the people who aspire to be part of the European Union, countries, societies, which inspired to be part of the European Union, were supposed to accept also European approach to memory and the general narrative about the 20th century. And they did so until they joined the European Union. It is year 2004 when things changed dramatically for those who didn't want to see what was to be seen quite a long time before. That is that East European countries did not accept the European narrative for many reasons, among other reasons because many of the heroes in the national narratives of these countries are participants of Holocaust. And this is pretty uncomfortable. So what you do in this situation, you follow the receipt which was used by Ukrainian North American diaspora long ago when they had to face these accusations. You offer, instead of the narrative which is focused on Holocaust, the, so to say, the tale of two totalitarianisms. In other words, it is the century where two totalitarian regimes basically are responsible for everything bad which happened, and that is why already in 2009 they dropped authoritarian regimes out of this list of condemned in resolution which was establishing the date of remembrance of the victims of two totalitarian regimes. Basically, it is the story which is perceived in Russia as a very challenging and dangerous narrative which had to be fought against. Initially, Russians tried to do it by addressing people in these countries, but also people in Western Europe, saying that, well, just call them to order. It didn't work, understandably, and basically, gradually, Russians were accepting this understanding of memory politics as the field of politics. What it means, why it is so intensive, because it is also linked to two recent trends. One trend is securitization. So our discussions about memory are supposed to be also, to have to deal also with our security issues. These security issues can be the unity of the European Union. These security issues could be undermining the integrity of our nation, and so on and so forth. You will see it in documents on the Russian side and European side. Another is identity politics. We are not in the madhouse of United States yet, but it's coming. And these identity narratives, which are supposed to be supported by some historical narrative, which, if being challenged, is perceived as a personal offense, is a typical sign of today. It is only such lunatic as Fukuyama who can claim that it is a new thing. It's not a new thing at all. It is the thing which started in early 2000s, and if you look at what Brubaker had written already in 2004, it's all about that. Now, what it meant for Russia, it meant that Russia was actually a latecomer to this game. If you look at 1990s, you will see that basically there are no institutions in Russia which are dealing with memory politics, except one civic institution which was called Memorial. It was such a space, the state was so carefully trying not to intervene that we entered the 21st century without an official anthem and official coat of arms of the country. It was only the first years of Putin when he manipulated these two majorities in Duma, one with liberals, another with communists. First with liberals, and communists were shouting shame, and then with communists against liberals, and then liberals were shouting shame when already the anthem was accepted. Now, if we look at this situation of the first decade of the 21st century, then we see how the state adopts the program of patriotic education in 2005, and all the money go to Ministry of Culture and Ministry of Mass Communications. Why? Not because these two ministers are extremely powerful in lobbying only, but also because basically there is no other institution which could manage such a program. When the next program is adopted in 2010, you already have a lot of government agencies more focused on youth problems, on patriotic education, etc., etc. Still, it is all state institutions. But if we look at the situation, how it develops after the first decade of the 20th century, first century, we see that things change dramatically. This institutionalization of memory politics develops with dramatic speed. I would say that 2012 is this key year for understanding what is going on. Several things happened in this year. The state established these are non-state institutions which were chaired by the chairman of Duma and the Minister of Culture. So their, so to say, independent civic character is rather, questionable. The first was Russian Historic Society, and the other was Russian Military Historic Society. By now we understand that the second is much more influential and powerful than the first one. I'll come to it. Another very important thing which happened at that time was the beginning of the process of establishing cultural historical standard. That was a document which had to regulate what is being taught about history. And this historical standard was aimed not at having one textbook as it was supposed to, how it was interpreted, but it was aiming at taking control over the 20% of class hours devoted to history, which were given to the regions. So regions could write their own textbooks and have their own programs. And reasonably, people in Moscow saw it as a sort of problem. Because if you have read any of these books, you would feel that it is not something with what you want to live for any longer. Now, that means that they wanted to have an instrument which would allow them to control the contents of this 20%. But probably the most important event of 2012 was the law which introduced the concept of foreign agent. The law said that if you are receiving money from abroad, you have to report about it, and you have to mark all your production as the product of a foreign agent. That meant that the overwhelming majority of non-state organizations did their best to avoid this label and to refuse foreign funding. One of such organizations is the place where I work, European University at St. Petersburg, and we follow these rules so strictly that we are in much more, how to put it, censored situation than state universities. We cannot take a single penny of any foreign money, to an extent that an author who wants to publish in our press a translation cannot financially support this translation. It's really crazy. But that means that a lot of foreign money were out of this market and a lot of state money were in. State very fast became the main sponsor of all these initiatives. Now, the next important year was, of course, 2014, when state basically dropped the initial, how to put it, mood of establishing a kind of partnership between state and society in doing certain things. As an example, I can provide you an example of the program which I was engaged in. That was the program to commemorate the memory of victims of political repressions. I participated in writing this program. I liked it very much for one thing. It was all about bringing society in. It was ready. It was unofficially adopted by the state, and then everything was stopped in the context of the crisis around Ukraine. And this program was reanimated in 2015, but there was no much life in it anymore, in a sense that, okay, you want a monument to the victims of political repressions, we'll build you this monument. The initial idea was that society comes together to build this monument with the nations and participates in a broad discussion of how this monument should look like. In 2015, that was a very different story. So I would say that it is the second decade of the 21st century when these memory politics failed, became very intensively institutionalized, and it is now really full of what is called, in this jargon of political scientists, mnemonic actors. We have these two huge institutions, Russian Historical Society, Russian Military Historical Society. Military Historical Society has branches in all members of the Federation. And in all members of the Federation, these branches are chaired by acting or former politicians, which means that they bring this administrative resource with them. This Military Historical Society overlooks the activities of approximately 1,000 of various patriotic organizations. And patriotic organizations in all countries, particularly big countries, are about how we fought wars, how we won wars, and how we died for motherland in the wars, with the exception of Germany. But it was not their choice. Now, topics. Because as soon as they realized in Russia that it's about war, one more thing before we come to this war issue, or rather another way to come to these issues. Also in 2012, we have got a new public initiative which proved to be extremely successful, which is Immortal Regiment. For those of you who don't know, very briefly, it is a march on the 9th of May through the streets of the cities where people carry the portraits. Initially, it was the idea of those relatives who participated in war, not necessarily died in war. But now you can carry a portrait of somebody else, but if you want to participate. If you don't have relatives of your own who participated in the war, but you can carry a portrait of another veteran. It's something really huge. It's about hundreds of thousands of people participating on their own in such cities as Moscow, St. Petersburg, but in many others. That was made possible by success of another very important initiative, which was again not state initiative, and that was St. George Ribbon, which was invented to, how to put it, take this victory issue in the Great Patriotic War out of the communist symbolism, because all the symbols of Great Patriotic War before that were communist. So it was 2005 when this initiative was undertaken in Russia. In 2008, state started to support this initiative on a systematic basis. In 2011, after success of this ribbon in countries which were neighbors of the Russian Federation, we started having conflicts when politicians were demanding in Moldova, Ukraine, Baltic states, forbidding this ribbon. And that brings me to these wars. So we have soft power, if you wish, and we have this negative advertisement. So if you are designated as the main other in the European narrative, which combines also these features of the constitutive other, but also the internal danger, because of course everybody who is designated as populist in current European discourse is supposed to be funded by Putin. Then you end up in a situation when basically if Molotov and Ribbentrop didn't sign their pact on the 23rd of August 1939, there would not be the Second World War. I'm a historian. I will not engage with this point as historian, because then I have to use the second Russian language, which some of you might know. But what you do in this situation, you start fighting this war, creating, among others, an institution which was called the Fund Historical Memory. It was created early in 2007. And the production, people who work there are historians. They are doing professionally a good job in a sense that their research is factually good, but they are in position of, how to put it, ideal position of a propagandist, when you have to say the truth to get your propagandistic aims. But of course, as always, it is part of the truth. And these topics are participation of Lithuanian, Latvian, Estonian, Ukrainian, Moldovan, Polish, etc. heroes in Holocaust. There is a lot of publications based on Russian archives which were secret before. They're nicely supplied with these materials. And of course, their publications are forbidden in most of these countries. Welcome to the world of democratic censorship. Now, another story is the story of how leaders of these countries negotiated with Hitler in 1930s. Because, of course, the story how Soviets did it is very popular. How others did it is not so popular. These are small things, in my view. I mean, here I don't see much damage. Thanks to one of the greatest people of our time, Julian Assange, we know how Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian politicians reacted to Obama's cables when he was saying just halt this anti-Russian rhetoric, we are going to make this reload of our relations. And he got the answer, no, 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 that is not the space where we're going to compromise. Here we have situation when elites in these countries have very high stakes. Why they are doing so? They are doing so with their own political reasons. If you ask me a question, why, I'll tell you. Now, the bad thing is that these Russian memory politics begin to dismantle certain achievements of memory politics, which we had before. Most dramatic example are, of course, the Germans. In Russian narrative, Germans function in, so to say, two images. One image is a funny guy with spectacles who is pharmacist, maybe scientist, maybe mechanic who lives in Russia and brings all these skills to Russia in the 18th century, 19th century. And another image of the German is in high boots with Schmeisser, and he brings something else, different. And some 20 years ago, it was clear that this first image is dominant. It was also very in harmony with this formula modernization for whatever, democratization or something like this. Anyway, now it is different. Germany, which belonged to the first three of positively seen countries in Russia, 4 years ago belonged to 5 most negatively seen. Probably it is improved recently a little bit. But that is one thing. Another thing, and there are also certain emotional elements here, because the representation of German atrocities on the Eastern Front and during occupation was practically censored. We didn't have it for many years. And now we have it again. And we have again, or probably for the first time, the story which asks how many Dutch Norwegians participated not in resistance, but in Nazi regiments on the Eastern Front. And when you compare such figures, you might feel awkward. Believe me. Now, these topics are brought in this atmosphere of the whole-scale memory war. I think it is absolutely devastating technique. We have to understand these mechanisms to hopefully look for ways out. These ways out, we shall start looking for them probably in several years, not now, because there is certain inertia. But still, we'll have it at a certain point. Now, that is one side of the story. We offer these negative images, and as Europe creates the image of besieged fortress, we also created image of besieged fortress, and this image of besieged fortress is combined with something which I don't necessarily evaluate negatively, but which is a very important shift in Russian thinking, general thinking. Russians thought about Europe as a part of their future. That was a tradition which lasted for at least 2 centuries, maybe more. They don't do it anymore. And I think it is a good thing. I think it is a good thing because all the time Russians were functioning in this European identity discourse, and now I'm quoting one Norwegian guy, you know him, either as barbarian at the gate, and now we are barbarians at the gate, for sure, and alternatively as an eternal apprentice. Those who are all the time aspiring to be Europe and never quite make it. Basically, the main problem here is how to find a medium ground between this Eurocentrism of your thought and, so to say, Danilevsky tradition. There was such a guy in Russia in the second half of the 19th century. Consider, it is only in the second half of the 19th century when one strange guy wrote a book which argued that Europe is not, so to say, a part of us, but it's an enemy. There is such a tradition in Russian thought also. How we find some middle ground, not proclaiming Europe an enemy, but establishing a relationship after the collapse of this European dream. A productive relationship. So it's a big issue. And I have another 6 minutes to talk about this soft power. It's not by chance that in 2011 they started attacking St. George Ribbon in neighboring countries, because all these neighboring countries have bigger or smaller, usually quite big, problem. This problem is the Russian population and the treatment of this population by local states. In some cases, this population is deprived of citizenship. In some cases, they are feeling uncomfortably because of linguistic politics and so on and so forth. As far as communist symbolism was not legitimate anymore, also for the Russians. They were very happy to embrace the St. George ribbon as the demonstration of their loyalty to this narrative of the Great Patriotic War, where we fought on the right side and we did basically everything right. I must say that it is also part of this very complicated combination of internal and external factors which changed this story in Russia. Because if you look at the first half of 90s, there is no parade. There is basically no much of this celebration of the victory in Great Patriotic War. It is only starting with late 90s and particularly after 2000. 2000 is probably, no, 1995 is the first case when for the Jubilee year some leaders of the neighboring states refused to come. And at that moment they realized that it's going to be a fight about it. So Paul Kolster wrote an article about St. George ribbon where he shows that in 2014 it got a very new dimension because these people who were fighting against Kiev in Donbass, be it people from Russia or locals, were wearing St. George ribbon. Yes, that's true. But the reaction against St. George ribbon came much earlier. And now we have this interesting situation, how authorities in these neighboring countries are trying to block these initiatives of commemoration. Because we have this field where commemoration of those people who perished in the Second World War, ending Nazi atrocities in some spaces, was stopped and challenged. And that becomes a field where you can react very emotionally and feeling that this emotion is, how to put it, legitimate. One German foundation stopped to invite me with talks, although they did it regularly before, approximately 3 or 4 years ago, when there was a talk like this. And one German gentleman stood up during Q&A session and said, "You know, I think that Germans and Russians should develop some common ceremonies of penitence for what they did in the Second World War." It made me a little bit angry. So I said, and I know the place where we should do it. It's Auschwitz. You were there, we were there. And that was the end of the discussion. So what we have here is a situation when this memory war contributes a lot to this Russian perception of the way how people look at Russians in Europe as alliance Because when you look at sociological data, you see how the understanding of role of the Soviet Union in the Second World War changed during these years. It used to be the understanding that the Soviets were the main force which crushed Hitler after the war. Now it is like 10% in European countries who believe this point. Rather, they would argue that it is, well, Brits would argue that this is Brits. It's fine. Many would argue that it's Americans. And when you have this feeling that basically they are doing to their historical narrative what they wish, we are allegedly entitled to do the same. This logic is extremely counterproductive, because in both sides it plays into the hands of those who want as radical antagonization as possible. How can we oppose this logic? It's a different question. We are trying to do it in Russia. I mean, the center, which I established 2 years ago for memory studies in European University in St. Petersburg. Maybe somebody would try to do it in Europe, because until during this voting in the European Parliament, it was only former communist factions who opposed this resolution. Should it be so? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, let's reorganize the scene a little bit, and we'll open up for Q&A. But I wanted to ask you first, because you talked about the memory wars, and you said, well, maybe not now, but looking into the future, the ways out of these memory wars. What steps can be taken? You hinted at that towards the end about the activity of your center, but could you say a little bit about how to navigate out of these memory wars that we're now engulfed in?
I tried to hint to my understanding of solution to this problem, or rather a step towards this solution, is oppose radicals on both sides. That is the most important. I will give you one example of how it is problematic. For many years, I'm doing various programs or projects, or just having contacts with various German foundations. By the way, all American foundations were kicked out. German foundations were not. And that shows that, well, you have to appreciate it. Now, if you have a conference on memory, it will never happen so that Germans and Russians would talk to each other without a presence of the third party. If it is German organizer who is doing it in Germany, they would definitely invite people from Poland and from Baltic states, and that would transform immediately the whole conference into a very traditional story about was really Soviet regime as bad as Nazism. When I was telling people, look, we are losing something in Russian-German relations. Maybe it's time to talk to each other just one-on-one about these things. and probably they still believe that we shall offer them the next partition of Poland, which is not exactly true. But I mean that this is the first step. At the moment, you have a situation when you have here in Europe this concept of Putin's first air, which means that if somebody disagrees and somebody says that maybe there is any reason on the Russian side, which is of course Putin's Russia, as you know, then he's illegitimate simply. He cannot take part in this discussion. Just give voice to people. And we need the same in Russia. We're fighting about it. Because in Russia you have a lot of people who want this war, who think that this war is not quite enough. It's the logic which is presented in the way how Polish-Russian dialogue develops. Polish side wanted a monument in Katyń for the perished president, which would be a wall 100 meters long. Medinsky, who is the Minister of Culture, came up with counter initiative. He said that, yes, we are prepared to discuss it if you build a wall 100 meters long in your main cemetery where Soviet soldiers of 1920-21 are buried. And it's very clear that both sides are not interested in any dialogue. Here, in Europe, there are people who understand how this replacement of cosmopolitan approach by antagonistic approach, how it is dangerous. They are trying to develop a concept of alternative, which is called agonism, agonistic approach. Chantal Mouffe developed this concept, which says, okay, we shouldn't pretend it doesn't work anymore, that you can build identities without using the other. But that does not mean that our dialogue should transform into a war. Maybe we can save the dialogue. Maybe we can talk to each other with mutual respect, not talking to each other in order to humiliate and destroy, but to understand and to see, to bring back this idea that dialogue is something what Greeks meant. Dialogue is a process in which you present openly, honestly, your state of mind, your thoughts, your wishes, your concerns, in hope that you will be understood and your reasons will be taken into consideration. If you talk to politicians, they will tell you that this is idiotic. Political life is not about this. It's about win, and you are not going to betray your real plans and so on and so forth. But my idea is that this is the only chance.
Let's open up the floor. I have several people that signed up. We'll start here. You have to use the microphone since we are streaming this event, and please introduce yourself.
My name is Vilan Ban. My question to you is the following. It seems to be Holodomor Recognition Week, at least by the Ukrainians. I would be interested in hearing your perspective from the Russian perspective on this and from the Ukrainian/Crimean perspective on this. Because obviously it must be part of what you are describing as nation building. Yeah, I don't know what to say.
So one by one?
Yeah, we'll take one by one initially.
Okay. So first of all, I'm not representing Russia. I'm representing myself. So it's not Russian perspective. Or rather, it's not necessarily typical Russian perspective. So I would put it this way. There is a book by a Ukrainian scholar which basically corresponds to my understanding of what the whole thing is about. His name is Georgy Kasyanov, and the English version of this book will appear in just months. The point he makes is that Holodomor is a cultural construct which functions in Ukrainian thought and legitimizes certain things and, well, does certain things politically. We should distinguish between the event, the famine of 32-33, and this construction of Holodomor, right? Russian side, because there was such a concept of dialogue of national historiographies, which sounds crazy, but they used to come together, bring together those people from Ukraine and people from Russia, and they will talk to each other for 2 days, and basically it was very clear that both sides are not going to change their positions. The first position was A, it is genocide, means it is against Ukrainians. Second, B, it's not genocide. That's it. Each has the standard set of arguments, look at other people suffering at that particular time, etc., etc., etc. I think that this is how history falls victim to political purpose and political usage of the past. Because we started with 3.5 up to 4 million victims of Holodomor. Now, even in sources which are allegedly respectable, it is from 4 to 7. And this inflation goes on and on and on. The question is how it functions, what for. The part of Ukrainian narrative of Holodomor is that to the houses of those who perished in this famine, the Soviet Union brought Russians. And that is how the problem of Russians in Ukraine emerges, which is absolutely wrong. It was 120,000 people who were brought to Ukraine from Russia at that time. And at the moment we have 7 million Russians in Ukraine. And second, it's not productive at all. So why you argue this? What do you want to say to Russians who live in Ukraine, right? Crimean perspective, I don't see how Crimea is here involved, because Crimea at that time was part of the Russian Federation. And it suffered from starvation. There were no Ukrainians there. And if you want to look at Crimea, it is one of these standard arguments. It was not just about Ukraine.
Okay, let's move on. Next question is from Paul Costa.
Hello, Paul Costa, University of Oslo. Thank you for mentioning my article, but I wanted to raise another issue. The commemoration of the remembering the victims of the Stalinist war. You said that for a long time only one civil organization, Memorial, was focusing on that, and it was a great problem that the state did not want to touch this at all. But then you also mentioned that someone in the Kremlin decided they wanted a monument. Okay, let them have a monument. And as I presume you are referring to this wall of sorrow, this Stena, which was not only something that they allowed them to have, but Stalin. No, sorry, Putin and Patriarch Kirill.
Freud.
President Vladimir Volodymyr Stalin and Patriarch Kirill opened it on, I think it was the 24th of October in 2017. And to me, that was a surprise. I mean, because on the 7th of November, only a few weeks later, Putin did not have any official statements or we did not appear in any events on the centennial of the October Revolution, but he did come to that moment. So did that change, signal a change of mind for Putin, or this was just something he would then soon afterwards forget about? And we haven't heard very much after that on focusing on the terror. So I'm curious about this.
Thank you very much. By that, we close the Q&A session because I have to answer. It will take me some time. To begin with, the end of your question, Putin made it absolutely clear that he doesn't want this centennial of the revolution to be celebrated as a state thing. In 2017, he participated in opening 3 monuments. One was the one you mentioned. Another one was the monument to his favorite Tsar, Alexander III, in Crimea. And the third one was restoring the cross on the place where, in Kremlin, where terrorists killed the Grand Duke Sergei before the revolution. The interesting element of this last issue is that this monument was destroyed with direct physical participation of Lenin. And when they were restoring it, Putin took direct physical participation in this process of restoration. Putin is part of this big Russian consensus, which can be called anti-revolutionary. Some people will say that October Revolution was justified, and there are still a lot of such people, like 40%. But if you ask, is revolution a solution to Russian problems today, 96% say no. There is one thing. Second, I didn't touch this memorialization of victims issue, although here we can also see certain nasty elements of international context. When Lithuanians and Latvians stopped allowing Russian embassies there to participate in restoration of these monuments to Soviet soldiers, this year Russian government stopped to allow them to come and restore the graves of those Lithuanians and Latvians who were exiled. So it is like exactly this war where nobody wins. You have to understand that already in 1990s, there were over 800 monuments and commemorative plaques to the victims of Soviet political repressions. 800.
Small ones in the provinces.
Sorry?
Only small ones in the provinces?
Not necessarily small ones. If you look at the monument created by Neizvestny in Magadan, you can use whatever word, but it is not small at all. it can be used as the light for the ships. But there was no such a monument in which would be, how to put it, sponsored by the state power in the center of the capital city. That was the issue. And they came up with this monument. What is different with this monument compared to other memorials which had been opened recently is that if you look at this monument, it is a very clear sign of de-individualization. It's a wall of people without faces. And there are two names which figure on the plaque near memorial that sculptor Frank Gulan created it and President Putin opened it. However, at the same time, they opened the Butovo monument. This is a place near Moscow where they were killing people, and they created a kind of a log into which you go, and on the right side and on the left side from you are the endless walls with the names of the victims. And you go and you can touch and you can read and you go through it. And there are many other initiatives which exactly focus on individualization of victims. One of such initiatives is this famous reading of names of the victims near this huge Solovki stone in the center of Moscow. Tricky thing is that usually we talk about state-sponsored and public initiatives. And among public initiatives, we, for example, mention a very important initiative, the last address. The last address it was inspired by Stolpenstein. Germans were putting this small metal bricks into their pavement to show that here 3 or 4 or 5, 6 Jews were taken from this exactly building. Yeah. Now, in Russia, these are small plaques, very small, where you have information about who was the guy, why, when he was taken, and when he was rehabilitated. And the organization which puts these plaques on the walls, it engages volunteers to do it. It's important because remembering, you see, by participating in certain act of remembering, we are creating communities. This is community of remembering. And allegedly, it is just a independent initiative. But when you look closer, you will find out that there is state money even there, because they are funded by the Yeltsin Center. And the Yeltsin Center is fully funded by the state. So this role of the state is more complex and multifaceted. So for me, it is absolutely no surprise that Putin participated in it. It is absolutely no surprise that Putin doesn't like revolution. He didn't go up officially with critique, although unofficially he's on the record saying that if somebody profited from this revolution, it was not Russia. But soon he was supposed to have elections. And in these elections, like 90% of those people who still consider revolution to be a good thing were supposed to vote for him. So what you do? You don't offend these people. That's it.
So you promised a long answer, and but we still have time for a couple of more questions. So you're next. And then.
Yes, my name is Arne Dahlaug. First of all, really thanks a lot for a very interesting lecture about memory politics. Not that long ago, I finished 3 years service for the OSCE in Luhansk, in the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, and I've been working out of that area, also of course in the Donetsk. And you really triggered my curiosity when you talked about the St. George ribbon and the history change, so to speak, about the celebration or commemoration of the Great War. I've had the opportunity to watch that in the temporarily occupied areas, as it's called in Ukraine, for 3 years. And this St. George ribbon and everything about the Great Patriotic War on the 9th of May is a really, really big thing. And of course, there are also so-called state leaders coming from other areas, from Abkhazia, Ossetia, and so on. So my question is, if you would like to say a few words about memory politics in those areas that I mentioned, I would be really interested, to put it mildly. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for this question. Now I have to tell you that what I'm going to say is based not on my research. It's based on research of my colleagues. And I will give you the names of these colleagues. But I think that we study this, have discovered some pretty interesting things. I shall start with the thing which I promised but I didn't talk about, Novorossiya. It is actually something which does not belong to memory politics in a certain sense. When they pushed forward this concept of Novorossiya, they didn't care how much it corresponds to the historical reality of Novorossiya in the 19th century. They were just formulating a concept which would legitimize expanding of this territory and stressing that basically this territory was not a traditional part of Ukraine. But now we come to this Donetsk, Lugansk, and I would add here Transnistria, because they show something which is usually not fully appreciated by the observers. If you look at the official title of the Transnistrian Republic, it is Transnistrian Moldovan Republic. This is not by chance. They claim that Moldovans are very welcome here. Who is not welcome here are Romanian integrationists. When we look at Donetsk and Lugansk, we discover the same thing. When Strelkov came, he was representing this concept of Russian irredentism. And there was a concept of Russian Spring, which was supposed to come, God knows, to Kiev, maybe to Warsaw. But as soon as he was withdrawn, on the spot, people started to develop not Russian ethnic narrative, not Russian ethnic identity, but something what my colleague Alexander Voronovich calls internationalist separatism. He published an article recently in this post-communist Studies journal by Gorenburg. What he argues is that they argue that their separatism is a reaction to attempt to impose of them certain type of nationalism. They argue that Donbass is an area where people of various ethnicities, various nationalities, Ukrainians, yes, Russians, yes, Armenians, whoever, Jews, many people, they participated in creating this special area which was the industrial heart of the Russian Empire. And what they develop is not a sort of, because our view is dominated by the idea that everything is about building national identity. No. You can build identity which is not just simply primitively national. You can build a regional identity, and they are building a regional identity. They are resisting to these attempts to impose Russian nationalism on them, and of course they are resisting attempts to impose Ukrainian nationalism on them. They're saying, we are here, Ukrainians are welcome, Russians are welcome, but there is some special dimension to this society, to this socium. And this is very important. And this leaves actually some space for solution of this problem. But we'll see. I mean, it's not them who is making decisions.
That's for sure. But it's interesting that you draw this parallel to Transnistria, where, of course, it's also this, it's not Russian, it's something international composed of the three, although mostly it's expressed in Russian language with Russian connotations. But we have a question in the back. Geir, next.
Yes, hello, Geir Flikke, Professor, University of Oslo. I was always captivated and fascinated by the term memory politics, but evidently the way you describe it, there is an element of commemoration politics in it, namely what history does to mobilization and how you mobilize people around a certain idea and so forth. And my question springs forth from that particular instance, because after the annexation of Crimea, you would say big statues erected to Vladimir the Great in Russia, but you would also see competing statues that is sort of associated with another dimension of the imperial history of Russia, namely statues to Ivan Grozny. How would you, as a historian, look at that internal polarization of memory inside of Russia?
Well, I think that these two sorts of statues are very different sorts of statues. Because if you look at Ivan Grozny, it's local initiatives in the regions, and the regions are desperately looking for, it sounds cynical, but it's true, for improving tourist potential. And if you have just nothing, you don't have even Munch, then what you do? Then you look at what you had. You had, for example, the battle which never happened, this famous staying on the river Ugra, where Tatar troops came, Russian troops came, they stood on different banks of the river, Tatars didn't attack and went away, and that was the end of what in Soviet times was called Tatar yoke. So they decided that they need a monument and they need a all-Russian holiday to commemorate this event. And of course, in Moscow, people were crazy. What are we going to say in Kazan? So Vladimir is a different story. It stands in the center of Moscow. And it was, how to put it, sometimes you do something as a sign of defeat. And this was the sign of defeat. In which sense? When you look at 2011, 2013, you see how active was Patriarch Cyril in promoting the concept of Ruski Mir, Russian world, but he was interpreting this concept as a soft power. He was saying that this concept should be realized with the acknowledgement of and respect to the political sovereignty of the new states. And he would go to Vladimir in Kiev, which was also created by the imperial state. And there he would have a huge march joined by hundreds of thousands of people, and Poroshenko would bury this icon. At that time, he was part of this movement. After Crimea, this story was over. Note that, by the way, church is extremely important player in memory politics, of course. And Cyril didn't come to this celebration of accepting Crimea and Sebastopol into the Russian Federation. Just imagine the symbolic meaning of it. But of course, it was very clear that the statue to Vladimir in Kiev is not reachable anymore. Then you create your own Vladimir. And initially, it was even the idea that it should be on the bank of the river, as the initial one was. But thanks God, just from the physical condition of this bank, they couldn't put it there. But the idea to create this huge statue was the sign of this acknowledging of this defeat. So in my understanding, these are different stories. And you have to realize that a lot of this stuff is local initiative. When we speak about 800 monuments commemorating the victims of Stalinist repressions, obviously it is local initiatives. And in this case also.
Seems like your voice needs a break soon, but we would have time for our final short question, if there are. Yep.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. My name is Peter Røkseth. You were sort of emphasizing the massive mobilization related to the commemoration of the Great Patriot War. When it comes to Moscow, St. Petersburg, you also mentioned other places in Russia. I sort of wonder if there is a sort of decentralization of that kind of massive mobilization also to, for instance, northwest part of Russia, and is there if there might be some reasons for that, or if compared to Siberia, do you have places that have also that kind of massive mobilization? Some more comments on that, please, would be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. Actually, it is striking how your questions lead me to lacunas in my talk. Thanks again. So, to begin with, this movement, Immortal Regiment, was initiated in Siberia. State obviously wanted to control it at a certain point, to have, so to say, the leading say in all this, which is quite understandable. The idea that they were trying to create something absolutely apolitical is naive, because if you want to organize a mass march in a city on the 9th of May, you cannot claim that you are going to do it with without local authorities, right? But there is another side to it. As soon as this initiative was, so to say, got approval and legitimacy, and Putin also marched with this portrait of his father, then you can replicate these initiatives. So there is one initiative which is being organized by, say, administration of your town, but then you come and say, we want a separate column which participates in this march. How can you say no? It's, and basically, why should they say no? That is one thing. Second very important thing is that these new symbolic practices, they work also as integrative mechanisms for those people who do not feel quite comfortable as, so to say, legitimate part of the Russian nation. Think about millions of gastarbeiters who do not look like typical Russians, right? But if they put on a St. George ribbon and join a column, nobody would tell them just go away. They will become part of it. And they are doing it en masse. And that is how this integrative mechanism works. I think that political opposition to Putin made a huge mistake in 2011 when they tried to juxtapose a white ribbon to the St. George ribbon. If they were clever, they are not, then they would combine a white ribbon and a St. George ribbon without giving a symbol which has support of 80 or even more % of the population to the rival. That is how Lukashenko functions, because he's clever. He created a ribbon which half consists of St. George ribbon and half of the national flag colors. So my understanding is that St. George ribbon is going to live longer than Putin. And that means that this fact that the ribbon is now very strongly associated. If you don't like Putin, you are not going to put St. George ribbon. This situation will change. And I still think that this ribbon can come back as a uniting all the forces, integrating all the political spectrum symbol. So we are just in the early stages of the history of the St. George ribbon, in my view.
Then we will have to come back to that at another stage. But as for now, I would like to thank you very much. And please join me all in giving Alexey a big hand.